Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to be here. I came from Cincinnati, so it's my first time in Sacramento. It is warm, but it's dry and it's awesome. So it is. It's cold in Cincinnati and wet right now. So I do like the weather. It's pretty awesome. We have a couple things up here just for you to take with you. It's a little quick, kind of two-sided flyer on a little bit more about who we are. We'll talk about that in a second. But there is a webcam cover to protect you from jumping into meetings and not being fully ready for the meeting and not have a suit on or something. And we have our business cards up here as well. So if you want to grab those. So we'll jump right in. Today we're going to talk. The title is Hacking the Paradigm, and really what we're going to be focusing on is that our mindset in security needs to start to change because the attackers are changing faster than we are. And so we're going to talk about that and how you can do that in your environments. So who's Vigilant Technology Solutions? We're a company based out of Cincinnati. We're privately held. We have a no-sale policy. We're fully funded internally, so we have no investments or anything like that, which allows us to be very focused on doing things the way that we feel like they need to be done. But we, as a company, our primary product is a product called CyberDNA, which is a managed security network security monitoring service, where we watch the outside and inside of your environments and watch them for threats that are unknown. So we go beyond signature-based detection. We basically, in 15 minutes, can give you a beyond security detection or beyond defense contractor detection, as well as a security operations team in about 15 minutes. So.
Okay, and I'm from LinkSource Technology Partners. We are located in Roseville, California. Been in business since 2009. Privately held company. We are primarily in the telecom and security consulting services line of business. On the telecom side, we focus primarily on expense management, audits, recovery, and optimization. In the past 2 years, LinkSource has saved their customers $1.6 billion. So we have customers across the nation, some very prominent Fortune 500 companies located across the nation around the globe. For the security arena, we've recently partnered with Vigilant Technologies, and we're a managed service provider with their cyber security solutions. So very excited to be here today. I know a lot of you in the audience, and thank you for coming.
Okay, absolutely. So a little bit about us. My name is Chris Nyhuis. I'm the founder and CEO of Vigilant Technology Solutions. I guess that goes on to Stephanie. I've been in IT for 18 years. My career was spent, half of it was spent in more of a SCADA role with the frozen food industry, protecting ammonia systems and making sure that ammonia doesn't get accidentally or intentionally leaked into the atmosphere, doing really bad things to people's lungs, and protecting their infrastructure as well. The other half was spent in the automotive industry, in telecommunications, protecting voice transmissions as they went out to customers through automated reminder emails and voice transmissions and things like that.
And I'm Stephanie Cervantes. I've recently joined LinkSource Technologies. Spent the last 20 years plus in state of California government, doing basically privacy security. Some of you may know me from the Interagency Security Group, which I started and founded over 20 years ago, primarily to do sharing information security and knowledge amongst the state agencies and entities. I hold certifications in privacy and security, and serve also as a board member for InfraGard, the local chapter, so I know some of you from there. Very involved in the security community and very excited to be with the company and the things that we're going to be doing in security.
Absolutely.
Okay, so basically in this session what we're going to be talking about is hacking the paradigm. And what does that mean to you? Is it the traditional line of defenses that you've always thought about? Are you secure? We know that the threat vector is very different in today's world than it was last month. We've seen a lot of good security products and companies that have had bugs publicly talked about on the internet and made the media. It's a very high focus, cybersecurity. And so today what we're going to talk about is, what does 100% security mean? Is that even possible? Some of the old operational concepts that you've had, do they apply today? Does that make you bulletproof? Is there a magic bullet for security in today's world? And so those will be the areas that we're talking about, and then how you can enhance your security posture through perhaps visibility, and also by early detection and response.
Right. So the first part of that that paradigm is really around a simple question, and I'm sure many of you have been asked it in your careers. You may have asked it yourself, but it's, are we 100% secure? Right. It's a question that most director level asks because they're concerned about it. Right. It keeps them up at night. And the question has traditionally been answered yes, because we're doing prevention, we're doing all, and followed by here are all the different things we're doing, right? But all of those things are based around prevention primarily, and they're also based around systems that are really antiquated, and even to the point where there are a lot of new systems coming out, or new solutions that are even coming out new today, which are already antiquated based on technology that's really 6 to 8 years old, right? But they're being brought out as new. And the 100% security question really, it kind of gets blown out of the water with when your paradigm shifts. And back in 2009, when we were deciding what are we going to do here with Vigilant, what was really standing out to us is that we started seeing less attacks heavily on our perimeters, in very high-level defense contractor world, right? Very highly attacked networks. You started seeing less attacks on your networks, or that your intrusion detection systems were picking up less, or you'd see more noise. But when you actually saw real attackers that were stealing your data, they were already in your network the first time you saw them. And so that paradigm had to change. It has to change, and still has to change today, to where we realize that the moment we plug something into a network, rather even if it's our firewall, that firewall is no longer considered 100% secure. And you can see that a lot in today's world, where just even in the recent weeks, you see that there's a lot of devices out there that we're finding unknown vulnerabilities on firewalls, that allow people right straight through, or unknown vulnerabilities on a web server that allows people straight through. We had a customer that in 3 seconds, a nation state took over their web server, which was running Apache on Windows, and in 3 seconds took over it with an unknown vulnerability and attacked another nation state's DoD. In 3 seconds, they took over. So unknown vulnerabilities are out there. The attackers know about them. The moment you connect it, it's no longer trusted. And that's really that first step in changing that paradigm, is to realize that anything connected to your network is considered untrusted, unless it's invisible.
So the short answer is no. There is no 100% security.
Right.
Well, does compliance equal security? We've heard that if you're compliant, and you've gone through all of these risk assessments, you've met your checklists, that you're compliant. Does that mean that you're secure now? Many of us have to follow administrative manuals. We're following frameworks and standards that tell you set things up this way. We think that if we've got the checklist and the certification that we're PCI compliant, or HIPAA, or we meet IRS regulations, or PEP 1075, if we're FIPS 140-2 certified or compliant, COBIT, any of the frameworks or things that you need to use to be compliant, does that equal security? A lot of people and a lot of executives think that it does. What's your take on that, Chris?
Yeah, so my take on it is not, compliance is great because it makes organizations that wouldn't normally choose to have good security, it forces them to reach a bar, right? But the problem with that is that all of these are just bars, right, to reach, and it doesn't actually secure you, and if you look at a lot of the compliance that you have to follow, a lot of it doesn't really even pertain to actually protecting necessarily, other than just how you should store data, and there's different regulations that do help protect, but primarily it's not this active defense. Now the other thing is that all of these compliance regulations can be seen on a website, right, and they can be downloaded. And so where attackers, they know what defense you're already taking because they know what compliance you're going to take, right? So for us, when we approach a customer and we're talking to them, we approach anyone, we try to say, okay, this is great that you're compliant, but you need to go beyond that. You need to go beyond compliance into this kind of unknown realm where you continue to keep building and modifying your security. Now, if you look traditionally at how organizations balance their security, it's based around operational need and control. And everyone here, when they hear operational need, they go, right? Because operational need, as it rises, conversely, your control will drop. That's how it works, right? And then you have to fight back to get control, and then operational need has to fall back a little bit, and it does this. Now, it's even worse in BYOD. It's even worse in that things are moving to the cloud, right? Because now you have less and less control, and now you have infrastructures that you don't even control. And you have infrastructures that tell you they're compliant, but we'll talk about later, they're actually not secure, they're just compliant. And so now they're able to sell you a product because it's compliant, but it doesn't actually make you secure, right? So where we enter into that equation is we say, okay, you have this operational need control, the part that's missing is visibility. And so if you can provide as much visibility as possible into your environment, then you're allowed to have your control and your operational need kind of fight against each other easier. It allows you to give more operational need so that people on your teams can do what they need to do, right? It allows you to have the control that's needed, but also you're able to have visibility, which goes back to that are we 100% secure question of, now since you know that the first time you may see an attacker is once they're already inside, now your goal is to find them fast. And the faster you can find them, the better. So in order to do that, you have to have visibility. So for us, security does not equal compliance. It doesn't at all. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But security actually equals visibility. Security equals a process to learn from attacks. But in order to have a process to learn from attacks, you have to have visibility. After you learn your process, after you learn about your attacks, you need to have the ability to adapt to defenses. And the last part is you need to have real-time action. And so a lot of our change control may need to change a little bit when it relates to security. Because if something happens right now, you need to make sure you don't have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 30 days to be able to implement a block or a change so you can protect against that attacker. Because 30 days from now, your information is already going to be up on the internet, you're already going to be in the news, and if you could have mitigated that attack right when you first realized it, because you have visibility, you could have stopped the actual leak of that information and keep you out of the news. The other thing too, by the way, is knowing what you have to protect. We talk to a lot of government institutions and organizations, and a lot of them initially will say, we don't have anything that anyone would want. But everyone in this room knows you do, right? You have social security numbers for people, you have tax IRS documentation, you have, if you're a port authority, you have national security reason, things that you have to protect. And so it goes well beyond just what may just show up on your network.
So looking at these names of companies out there, can you tell us what you think they all have in common? Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have been hacked, and basically when you're looking at this, a lot of these companies have a lot of dollars to spend on security, and some of them have spent a lot of money there. Mm-hmm. And that does not mean that they're secure. And all of these companies have also been compliant. Mm-hmm. They've met their compliance checks, but they, as you've said, all been hacked.
Yeah, at the time of the hack, they were compliant.
Yes.
Which also, my feelings on compliance, and this is not a popular thing to say necessarily in the security world, but compliance tends to be a distraction to your teams a lot. You have to focus a lot of manpower on compliance, and so I think even compliance, the way we approach compliance, needs to start changing. so that way it allows your teams to continue to be nimble, and fight, because your attackers are absolutely nimble.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What's the 627 number?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that's how many people are represented just on this page. Individuals. Target was 70,000. And the other thing too is to note, and we'll talk about this later, is that none of these organizations had true contextual information on these threats. So these are guesses. Some of them did up here, but most of them did not. So they're guesses. So you have increased risk because you're guessing. You have increased, especially in the state of California, you have increased notification to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, their name, their target lost a significant amount of business in 3 months after that happened. How many organizations can handle that? Now you're, obviously government institutions, so that's a different approach, but still, it resembles, or it reflects 627 million people, and just in identity theft protection alone, that was paid out to those people is $12 billion. The other thing is most of these attacks, the attackers were in their environment well beyond 8 months before they were actually detected. So the facts, where do we stand today in security? So in today's world, 54% of malware typically evades antivirus detection. That includes IDS solutions, IPS solutions as well, that are based primarily on signature-based detection and even sandboxing. So signature-based detection only detects things that it knows about, very similar to the way we do healthcare, right? We have vaccines. If we have markers for something, we can detect what it is, and we can give a vaccine for it. And that's what the signature is to detect it, right? But if you don't know about the attack, then you can't detect it. Very similar, if I wore this suit every time I walked in this room, you could tell people that I'm Chris. Well, if I just wanted to be lazy and put jeans and a t-shirt on this morning, no one would know who I am, right? The other thing with sandboxing is that sandboxing, attackers are getting smart, right? So we have all this new sandboxing technology. But when a piece of malware runs on sandbox technology, it first checks how much RAM is in the box and a couple other things. If it notices that there's a gig of RAM, but it's running on Windows 7, and it knows that Windows 7 minimum requirements are 8 gig, they're going to say, well, I'm not going to deploy my malware because I'm probably in a sandbox. So that sandbox technology allows it to pass right through, right? So sandboxing is great, but you have to build a sandbox outside of a small little appliance because you have to have a sandbox that can actually fool the attackers. So this is scary, but then if you move to the next one, less than 2% of breaches are detected in the first 24 hours. That's bad. And less than 46% in the first 30 days. So that's pretty bad, right? But it's even worse if you go to the next one where you see that in 60% of breaches, that data is exfiltrated in the first 24 hours. So that means in 98% of breaches that are not detected in the first 24 hours, and 60% of those, data is exfiltrated in the first 24 hours. Pretty bad. A TrustWave study found that it takes, on average, 215 days for detection systems to find them. But in 90% of those breaches, or 92% of those breaches that it took 215 days to detect, 92% of those were found by a third party. So the IRS knocking on your door, or the FBI coming in, or a customer, or a constituent, or someone contacting you to say it's there. Anthem even was not found by a detection system. It was found because their IT admin just so happened, I think it was crazy, just so happened to be on a server and saw in the log file his username go across, and he thought there was something wrong, right? But even their detection systems didn't find it. So we got to start asking, why are detection systems failing, and why does it take 8 months for us to find bad guys? And bad girls. It's an equal opportunity. So average cost of data breach is $3.5 million. Some industries as high as $12.5. And depends on the size of your organization, it could be even larger than that. But cost per record is about $145 in credit or monitoring of identity theft. So, and then we enter the cloud. So.
Yes. And a lot of you will be asking, well, if I move my data to the cloud, will it be safe? Because they'll have all of the controls there. And the answer is not always. There's different reasons to move business to the cloud, but again, security still applies. When you're doing that, you still need to monitor the endpoints that are going in and out of the cloud and have visibility into that. So visibility even into cloud services is very critical and important for maintaining the security of your data and getting a quicker response time.
Right. And what you'll find, and those are some questions that you need to ask, and I would write these down. If you're thinking of moving to the cloud, make sure that you're moving to a provider. And I'm going to tell you the list is extremely small, almost non-existent. Moving to a cloud provider, and I won't name names because I'm not here to knock down what's out there, but make sure that they're able to do true visibility in real time on their networks and give you the opportunity to see that data. Because although you may move to a cloud provider, right, they're not built. They're built for scalability and ease of use, right? And so that serves a purpose, you know? I mean, there are definitely great purposes for the cloud. But if you're putting something in the cloud that requires compliance or that could be damaging to your organization if it was released, you want to make sure that the cloud provider you're going to can do true network security monitoring and visibility onto the wire. And I mean the wire. So a lot of cloud providers will say, hey, we have visibility into the cloud, into your cloud servers, because they're putting an endpoint solution there, right? That's great, but that endpoint solution is running on a vulnerable system, and if someone can attack it with an unknown vulnerability, now your endpoint no longer can give you visibility. It's untrusted.
Wouldn't you also need to find out where their cloud servers are based?
Right, that's a very good question.
And then also find out, if it's based out of the country, what those privacy laws would apply
Right.
to where there would be recourse to go after the people if something is breached.
Right.
And then who owns the data?
Right.
If there's some kind of subpoena or a request from maybe the federal government for your data,
Right.
if there's notification to you or if they can release it without your knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a very, even the outside the country thing is very important, because if you have your data stored outside the country and it's stored in a country that doesn't have as stringent background checks as we do, and you know, even for your security providers, a lot of security providers are putting your threat information in the cloud.
Right.
Horrible place. And what they tell you is, you know, what the cloud providers are saying is, hey, it's compliant. But we know that compliance doesn't equal security. And so by saying, hey, it's compliant, that protects them from liability. But they're not going to be the ones in the news when your data is stolen. It will be you. And so you need to make sure that you're protecting your reputation, you're protecting your constituents, you're protecting the people that your organization has the data for. And be very careful with, you know, working with providers that, you know, that do data outside the country, or even have employees that work outside the country that are not U.S. citizens, because even though they say, hey, we do background checks, they can't necessarily do it as well as we can in the U.S. because they don't have the infrastructure.
Do you know if any of the, entities that you put up there that had breaches, did any of them have some of that data in the cloud?
Some of them did, yeah. So outdated paradigm. So am I up there? Yeah. So even the best, you know, security architected networks with the best security products can be hacked. You know, think Sony, right? Sony has tons of money put towards it. Think JP Morgan, tons of money to put towards security. Carbonek, if you've heard of that, was a variant of a piece of malware called Dyer, which basically installed on a system in someone's environment, would go out to the internet, create what we call a command and control tunnel, which allows it's an outbound request through your firewall over common ports. And then because it's an outbound request and the way firewalls work, they allow an inbound connection to come back as a request, which then creates a backdoor tunnel through your network, through your firewall, and away an attacker goes in your system. They attacked 100 banks. This came out last February. 100 banks across the world, 30 different countries. They were in their environments for 2 years, completely undetected. They stole $1.5 billion. So completely undetected. Prevention. They have great prevention. They have, you know, they had firewalls, they had proxies, they had endpoint solutions, but they all failed because they're untrusted devices on the end, right? And their prevention. Prevention will always fail eventually because a human attacker will find a way to get around it, especially if they can readily buy the solutions you're buying on the internet or on eBay or wherever else, put it in their lab and attack against it so they can get around it. You know, another scary thing is malware writers can now upload to places like VirusTotal, and they can run their malware against VirusTotal, and it will tell them what AV clients will actually pick up their malware, and it's a great thing for security researchers. VirusTotal is amazing, but bad guys use it too to test their malware against it, and then they know, hey, if someone has whoever right? And it's not showing up on the list. I can now run my malware against you, and you won't even detect it. So crazy stuff. Systems are vulnerable. Code that's written is insecure. Systems are architected without security as a driver, resulting in security being bolted on after the fact. And anything being bolted on is always has issues. Heavy reliance on the magic appliance. Next-gen firewalls, the idea that the security, the paradigm for security right now in the industry is next-gen firewalls, right? Let's put all our IDS and IPS into the same device. Let's put it at our edge with an IP address up to the internet, right? Well, what happens if an attacker scans your network, sees that you have a certain firewall, they run an unknown vulnerability against it, get on it, modify your IDS and IPS, don't turn it off. They just modify it so it doesn't detect them, and now all your eyes are gone. So you need to have solutions that are invisible to an attacker, that are able to sit around those devices that can monitor what it's actually doing. You also have third-party devices that have embedded operating systems on it. We had a hospital back in the Ohio region that we went out to. They were having degradation of internet access. We jumped on their network. We found that 3 heart monitors that had embedded operating systems on them had configure running on, and it was dragging the bandwidth down. But they didn't know that operating system was running in their environment, and it didn't meet their compliance needs. But because they can't see onto the embedded operating system of that device, they had no idea. But we could give them that information. So you need to have the ability to have visibility. Tools oftentimes generate false positives, so that wastes time for your staff. So you need to make sure that you have a security team that is focused on, and this can't be the same team that operates your environment or that does your operational needs. You have to have a security team that is able to focus on nothing but security, right? Nothing but detection, so that way when the actual attack or threat information gets to your remediation team can trust 100% that it is something that's verified and an actual true event, so they can focus their time on it. And you also need contextual information. So there's things called full packet capture, which does full network recording of your traffic. You need to have contextual information, because if you get attacked, it's one thing to get an event that says that something bad happened, but if you can have contextual information, that network recording, kind of like TiVo for your network, you can go back in time and see what happened right before that incident happened. So say, for instance, CryptoLocker gets on your network, right? You need to be able to go back in time and rewind and see exactly how it got there, because then you can tell everyone else in your organization, don't go to this one website today because there's an ad on it that has, it's doing a drive-by and deploying CryptoLocker, and you can protect future incidents. So.
Okay. And most of you know that the biggest vulnerability to your systems, your data, is people. Everybody's doing more with less staff. Many of you it's you and your staff of you, or you have a couple of people and it's a large company and you have to go to meetings. People go to lunch, they take vacations, and so they unintentionally fail just by being human and not being able to be there 24/7. So, how do you prevent that? What do we do? We can't be there. We're not eyes and ears on everything all the time.
Yeah, and a lot of that is having specific people, having a team that is focused on nothing but that. Your operational people cannot be the person that's doing that, because they have to focus on operations, right? Your security team has to be able to focus on what's happened in the industry, what's coming from my intelligence feeds, and associating that to what they see in your environment. So why you should expect attacks? Today's attacks are well planned. They're organized attacks. They just are. They're coming through you to get either to your data or to get to a third party that you're connected to. They're very targeted. They're very advanced attacks. They're no longer just the throw it out to the internet and see what happens. They still are at a small level, but the ones you really need to be worried about are very advanced. They're going to be scanning you. They're going to be testing your equipment in their lab before they attack you. Cyber warfare is real, especially in your world. Nation state to nation state happens all the time, continuously. The nation state I was telling you that attacked another nation state, they attacked through the Apache web server with HTTP traffic. We actually saw DoD information from that secondary nation state passing through clear text, unencrypted, right through that server. So pretty bad stuff. Security tools are too public. hackers test against them before attacking in today's world. So you need to have things in your environment that are not well known, right? Hackers are happy to publish vulnerabilities once they get into your network because it gains them cred inside the hacker community. Attackers come through the supply chain, so all your external partners happen to target, happen to other groups that they're not attacking you necessarily they're attacking your partners. So you need to make sure that when you connect VPNs or connect to other partners or have people in your environment, that you're requiring them to have the same level of protection that you have. And money still drives most attacks. So hacktivism is huge, along with political and social motives inside your environment.
So, Chris, how do we change that paradigm then?
Got it. That's a very good question, Stephanie. So, let me jump into that. So really, how do you protect and change? Really, it's this idea of creating better solutions, training your people, both your security staff as well as your internal teams, but watching. And this is really the big thing, is to prevention and defense in depth is great, awesome, because you need it, right? But let your firewalls, let your preventative tools be preventative tools. Watch outside of those tools and have visibility into what your teams are doing, because someone's inevitably going to make a mistake, just because, like as Stephanie said, they've got a lot of things going on. Your team may have been up for 2 days straight because you got this change window to deploy all your new firewalls in that range, and they may actually make a mistake on your firewall and open up rules that they shouldn't have. You need to be able to have visibility into that happening, and you need to focus on security itself. Spend more time, and the focus thing here is interesting. Is that one of the things we find when we're working with government institutions is that to get in there takes forever, right? And a lot of the RFP process and multiple vendor rules and things like that. I really think that there needs to be some way, from like on a state-to-state basis, that and I hesitate to say governing body because those things can get messed up too. But some way for you to say, look, here's an approved list of companies that we can trust that meet the criteria that we need, and then you can automatically pop them in. Because if you get attacked or you have a detection problem or you have a visibility problem, you can't wait very long, because in 30 days the whole world's changed. Malware that we have today will not be worth anything 30 days from now because it'll have changed so fast. And attackers are nimble, but we're not, and that's gonna take us down.
And so basically, networks are like small children and pets. You have to continually monitor them. You need a staff that is focused on your network, that's continually monitoring, that are looking at those anomalies, those one-off things, things that appear randomly, so that they can say, hey, there's a threat here. And how do we do that? Basically knowing what you have. That's a big problem for most companies. You don't know everything on your network, and so you don't have the visibility there. So that can be a problem for a lot of us.
Yeah. One of the things there too is correct placement of your visibility, right? So you need to make sure that you're able to watch lateral movement within your environment, so network to network on the inside. You need to be able to watch what's happening on the outside as well of your network, and it has to be invisible to the attacker. Don't put it up on your website of what you use. It's very difficult, I know, because public information in the public sector, but try to protect what you're using in your environment, because you don't want to give information to your third party. If you're using vendors, make sure they don't put your name on their website. Don't allow them to do that, because you're just giving attackers knowledge about your defenses. Make sure that your teams do not post in security technical rooms of what you're using, things like that, because you want to make sure that, once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. And it's all searchable by Google. So if I want to look at what firewall is this organization using, you can find a lot of information about companies just from public knowledge now. You want to be able to have placement to protect the things and watch the movement in your environment. So be on your VLAN trunks and have visibility there. And don't use span ports. If a solution comes in and says, hey, just give me a span port. Does everyone know what a span port is? Okay. So you're opening up a port on your switch and you're sending traffic over to it so that a security detection device can plug into your switch and get information. If you do that, you have a 48 port gig switch pumping 48 ports worth of data into one single port. And we all know that funnel down into a small part, and it doesn't work very well. So you need to be able to get real-time traffic flow of all your data at the same time and not miss stuff. And if you're doing span ports, you're going to miss things, and attackers can hide inside of that. So you want to use very high-speed, expensive taps. And expensive sounds bad, but you want to use actual physical taps in your network so that it causes a little bit of downtime, 5 minutes of downtime to put in, but it gives you better visibility.
And your security team also needs to know your network. They need to know all of the tools. They have to have inside knowledge. So that ideal security team and analyst should consist of someone that knows basically everything spanning across your network, how to set things up, how to architect it, how to monitor it, what looks like a threat, what's not a real threat. And so it's very hard to get all of that when it's you and your staff of you.
Right.
So again, visibility in here is the key.
Right. This is important as well. Can determine what it is and not a threat and respond accordingly. You need to make sure that your teams have operational authority. And one of the reasons why the Navy SEALs are so, and if you ever want to read a great book on building a great security team, it's not a security book at all, but it's called The Navy SEAL Art of War. And it dives into how the Navy SEALs function as a team. And it's a great way to build your team because it gives them operational authority to make decisions without you, right? And which means you need to empower your team to be able to stop things fast and to know your environment well enough to be able to make good decisions instead of having to go back through. A lot of you can read history of war. A lot of battles get really close to us to being lost because they have to phone home to DC and get information operational authority. So have a great vulnerability and remediation process. It's one thing, and this is very important. If you're doing vulnerability scans and pen tests, which I know all of you are, because you have to because of compliance, when you get those lists, they're great, but they're one snapshot in time, right? And so 5 minutes later, someone could have installed something else, and you won't know about it for a quarter or a year, right? And that's bad. Plus, you also have this list, this document of 252 pages that your team now has to remediate. We did a pen test and vulnerability test for a college. We got in an hour and a half. Or in the first hour and a half we were into their environment. It's supposed to take 60 days for the pen test. We did the vulnerability test for them over a 200-page document 2 years ago. He called me, he said, "We're done." He just got through that entire thing. Now, the problem with that is when you're doing vulnerability tests, you're given ratings of high, medium, and low. Attackers are thinking differently. Our organizations think, I have all these high things, I need to fix these fast, right? It's not necessarily always the case. If you have visibility into your environment, you can know where your active threats are. And a lot of times attackers are attacking your low to medium level because they know that you're not going to fix them for a year, right? Or two, or if ever, because maybe your policy is just to fix high. And so if you spend all your time on your high level threats, but you're not closing off things that you're actively getting attacked on, you're vulnerable and your team's distracted and they're looking over here, it's kind of sleight of hand, right? So you're looking over here and they're already in your network. So not that high level things shouldn't be fixed, but you need to fix things with priority of active threat attack, right? If you've got a system on your network that never communicates to the network, but it's got some really high level attacks, doesn't communicate to the internet or outside to a vulnerable area, then it doesn't matter to protect that first.
So one of the takeaways from this session is security does not equal compliance. Security is that balance of the control and the visibility that you have into your network.
Right. The second one is that prevention is not enough. Your tools will fail, and they need to and they also generate false positives. So you need to find a way to give contextual information to your environment so you can very quickly minimize the time needed to handle those false positives, get to what's really actively happening in your environment, and give that to your remediation team with specific information and steps. Your security operations team or your analyst team should be able to know your network well enough to be able to talk to your remediation team and say, hey, I just saw this in your environment, we verified it, it's 100% verified, and here are the steps that you need to take to remediate it. So your security remediation team should be able to take that information and just walk down a list and clean it. Whether that's unplug and reimage, or that's, hey, I got a live server that can't go down, so here's the steps I need to take to remediate it. They need to be given that information. Because your remediation team shouldn't have to figure out or do incident response in order to do that. And the paradigm of incident response is usually deploy someone out, have them sit on the end devices and figure out what's going on. You should already have that information because your network doesn't lie. Your network is the only place an attacker's not going to be able to modify that traffic. Now they may send malformed packets across. Like we had a customer that had DNS, their DNS packet was a little bit larger, and we noticed that. And so we said, okay, why is it larger? We looked into it and we found credit card information being sent in DNS requests out to China in clear text. And so we saw that. But the thing is that if you're not looking, you don't have visibility, you're not going to be able to see those things. And then people fail because they have other duties and can't continuously monitor systems. In 100% of the organization we've gone into, we've seen bad things, right? It's not because the staffs aren't doing their job. It's because they're understaffed, they're under-budgeted. Most institutions, the least growing teams at organizations is IT staff, and the least budgeted teams is at IT staff. But they're also, you can handle a fire, you have redundancy there, but you can't handle your reputation or loss of data. And once it's gone, it's gone. And cybersecurity is now really the only thing that can overnight take you out, in a very massive way.
And also, you can't, if you're basing your security purchases and your architecture, your recommendations on things like Magic Quadrants or research companies saying this is the best in breed, you're going to miss a lot of excellent security products that may never meet the criteria to be on one of those lists. Because the truth is, a lot of those lists are marketing tools. They're done by analysts that are fed by companies that have large testing or marketing budgets. And some of them are even almost like a subscription-based service that you pay to get onto the list. And so if you're only relying on that, you're going to miss some of the new products that are coming out that are cutting edge or best, that are really, truly best in breed, that aren't following that old paradigm. So be careful when you use those.
Takeaway number 4 is that security appliances can't be relied upon for total security. And what we mean by that is perimeter prevention devices and appliances. You can't depend upon them. We have just recently, and I won't tell you who the vendor is because we don't want to release that information, but we had a customer that upgraded their firewall to a new firewall, and they set that firewall so that it would go outbound and get intelligence lists to update what that firewall should be blocking. And they put it has capabilities to add multiple different intelligence lists in. What we found is, as soon as they popped that thing in, it was starting to go out and access these lists. But what it was also doing was it was trying to log into those lists, and most of these lists don't ask for usernames and passwords. So what it was doing instead, since there wasn't a username and password inside that list setup, the configuration, it actually sent the admin username and password in clear text, unencrypted, out to that intelligence source. And that's what it's doing. And it's doing it right now. And the customer's trying to get that changed. They actually disabled that entire feature because it's a bug. So their username and password, admin username and password, just went out, and they had no idea until we saw it, right? And so having visibility around those devices allows you to hold your security partners that you're buying appliances from accountable to make sure that they're doing the things. You can't just put all your trust in them. Same thing with third parties. Heartbleed came out, and companies, last year, companies, went and upgraded their servers, but IT people make mistakes sometimes because it's late in the evening. We saw multiple times where third-party applications would miss 3 or 4 servers of a server cluster, right? And you have to be able to detect that and watch it in your environment. The other thing is they help. It helps reduce risk by having visibility. But putting reliance on those devices is really a false sense of security. And answering that, are we 100% secure question is yes. You have to start training your leadership and your organizations to realize that saying no is not a bad thing. Because if you say no, it wakes everybody up to say, okay, well, what do we do about it to get as secure as we can be?
And vulnerability and penetration testing, as we discussed earlier, is good.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know what's there. Very good at looking at your websites before you bring them up, critical applications, that type of thing. But as Chris mentioned earlier, it is a snapshot in time. You're only secure as that at the time the pen test was done. So unfortunately, many of our execs, many of our leadership, they view that, or project managers think you have a pen test, vulnerability test done along with compliance, and we're good. We're perfect. We're not going to be hacked, and that's just not true. Again, you need that visibility into your environment on a continual basis, because once somebody changes a line of code, they update something, or something else plugs into the network, you're no longer at that state of security that that pen test and vulnerability test showed you. And so, again, key is visibility there.
We have one more takeaway. So networks must be continually monitored. You have to. It's just like Stephanie was saying, you can't just do a vulnerability test, and if it comes back green, you're good, right? You have to continually monitor. Because, again, the vulnerability test that you're scanning, if someone comes on your network and they scan for a vulnerability test, they're only going to know about known vulnerabilities, too. So they're not going to give you a list of unknown vulnerabilities that exist in your environment, because it's not fed with that information. Very similar to signature-based detection. And so unless we know about it, those tests aren't going to show. So that's why you need continual visibility. You need people that are doing proactive hunting in your environment, so they can find the things that our automated systems can't. No network is unhackable. As long as it's connected, it's hackable. Monitoring by skilled technical staff provides real-time visibility. You got to have technical staff that's what they do. It's their focus. And then visibility and quick threat detection are key, because you have to, everything rides on your visibility. If you can have visibility, you can find them fast, you can stop them, you can mitigate the risk very quickly, you can learn from it, and you can stop other people using that same one. Because once someone gets in, the exact steps how to do it show up in chat rooms, and now you've got a whole slew of other people trying to get in.
So what's the answer then,
Yeah.
Chris?
It's the answer. That's a very good question, Stephanie. I like it. The answer really is you need to have a team. You need to have, but having a team is not just enough. You need to have the ability to detect well and to have good visibility. So you have two options. You build that internal or you build that external. I really believe that we're moving towards, and this is not just a marketing ploy, because this is what we do as a company, but I think we're really moving towards an era where organizations just don't have the time to take 2 years to build a security operations team. They don't have the funding to build a security operations team. And by going, so either you have to build it internal, which means you have to develop tools that no one knows about, right? You have to build layered protection, layer detection, and you have to build a team, which there's a very large lack of very skilled people. Or you go with a managed security provider that can follow the criteria we've talked about today, that can be invisible, that has U.S.-based citizens working for them only, that protects U.S.-based assets, that has a focus on being nimble and being ahead of the game instead of having a rudder that has to change over months and years instead of very quickly to stay up with the attackers. But really, if building an internal or using an external, the biggest thing is your team needs to be nimble. They have to have operational authority to be able to give you proper information. They have to have the ability to have visibility. You have to have contextual information by using full packet capture and network recording, and you have to have the ability to have continual visibility beyond vulnerability.
And you also have to maintain the chain of evidence in the case that you are breached, and law enforcement needs that data, or you go to prosecute.
Right.
So Cyber DNA.
So yeah, so and you can ask. We're actually out here. We can talk about it if you want to talk more about what we do and how to approach it. If anything, come talk to us and we can give you some criteria what to look at for in your security providers because it is the industry has allowed security providers to be somewhat not intentionally relaxed, but there's a lot of providers that look in the wrong direction, and that's why you're seeing companies with very large budgets with all the high tech tools getting hacked and getting through those environments. So and you need to be able to shorten that window from 215 days down to minutes, because if you can't find them in the first 24 hours, then 60% of those times that data is gone. And it's just getting there. That percentage is going up because they're getting better and better and better and better at it, and we are not getting better and better and better and better at it, right? So be nimble. Make sure that you're pushing your industry to be nimble, because it is a traditionally non-nimble industry. No offense, but it is really our front line of defense. And many times, you are the front line. You're protecting, the state of California, and its residents and its people. So we need to make sure we're as nimble as our attackers. So, I know we're just about out of time.
We're out
if
of
not at all.
time, but
So if you have any questions, you can ask them, or if you need to head out, feel free. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
If there is an unintentional fail point for the networks caused, how would your managed service or your outsourced center get past that point, and approximately how long would it take for them to resolve it?
Got it. So there's another lie out there. Like you'll see vendors that will say we stop 100% of attacks all the time, right? That's impossible, and they're lying to you. So going back to that, having visibility, making sure you're around those devices, making sure that your perimeter devices are watched, for vulnerabilities, that your secured environments have very pointed visibility at those demarcation points. But going back, kind of just not trusting, you almost have to not trust anything that has a public IP or that is connected to your network. That receives any connections. All right, and so you have to kind of look at your network like everything is untrusted, instead of things can be trusted. Because once it's connected, it's not. So anyone else?
Okay. Thank you. If you have questions,
Yeah, thank you
please
very
come
much.
by, see us. We're right out the door. Our cards are up here. We'd love to chat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.